Four teenage girls went to work one December night in Austin, Texas, but none of them made it home. Over 30 years later, the question still haunts everyone. Who killed them in the yogurt shop? This is the story of the yogurt shop murders, one of the most shocking crimes in Texas history. Four young girls, a small yogurt shop, and a mystery that has never truly been solved. For decades, families, police, and even strangers have been searching for answers, and yet the truth remains just out of reach.
It was a Friday night in Austin, Texas, back in December of 1991. The city was calm, and the streets were glowing with little lights from passing cars and stores closing for the night. On a quiet corner sat a small frozen yogurt shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and inviting. The big glass windows glowed softly, and the sweet smell of yogurt and waffle cones filled the air. Inside, four teenage girls were working. They were friendly, kind, and full of life. There was Eliza, only 13 years old, cheerful and always giggling. Her sister, Jennifer, was 17, calm and caring, the type who looked out for everyone. Amy, 15, had big dreams and loved to laugh with her friends. And Sarah, also 17, was bright and thoughtful, someone who made everyone around her feel welcome. That evening was like so many others. Families had stopped by for frozen yogurt. Kids had come in after a long day of playing, and friends had shared stories over sweet treats. The girls worked together as a team, serving customers, cleaning the counters, and making sure the little shop looked tidy before closing time. As the clock ticked closer to 11 p.m., the shop grew quieter. The girls laughed together while sweeping the floors and putting things away. Outside, the streets were calm. Cars passed by now and then, but the corner where the shop stood was getting sleepier by the minute. To anyone walking by, it looked like just another ordinary night. But something was wrong. Somewhere in the shadows, danger was waiting. The peaceful shop, filled with laughter just moments earlier, was about to become the scene of something terrible.
The front door jingled as a customer came in. It didn't seem unusual at first. Customers sometimes came in just before closing. The girls, being polite and friendly, welcomed them. But this time, it wasn't an ordinary customer. This was the beginning of a nightmare. No one outside knew what was happening. The quiet streets gave no hint of the fear growing inside the yogurt shop. The bright lights that had felt so warm and safe suddenly cast long, scary shadows. What should have been a happy night at work for four girls turned into one of the darkest nights Austin had ever seen. By the time the night was over, the yogurt shop was silent. The girls who had been laughing, smiling, and making plans for tomorrow were gone. The fire that broke out later would cover the truth in smoke and ashes, but what happened in that little shop would never be forgotten. This was no longer just a small frozen yogurt shop. It became the place where an entire city's heart broke. Families lost their daughters. Friends lost their best companions, and the community lost its sense of safety. People in Austin woke up the next morning to shocking news. The yogurt shop they had always known as a cheerful little corner of sweetness was now surrounded by police, yellow tape, and questions no one could answer. What happened that night? Who could have done something so cruel? And why?
Those questions still burn in people's hearts, even decades later. The yogurt shop murders became one of the most haunting mysteries in Austin's history. And though time has passed, the memory of the four girls, Eliza, Jennifer, Amy, and Sarah, still shines brightly. Their laughter, their kindness, and their dreams were stolen in one terrible night. But their story continues to be told because no one wants to forget them. The night it happened may have been dark, but the light of their memory is something that can never be put out. Early the next morning, the world outside the yogurt shop was waking up like any other day. Birds sang, cars drove by, and people were ready to start their Saturday. But something was very wrong at the little shop in Austin. A police officer driving down the road noticed smoke coming from the building. It was strange because yogurt shops don't usually have smoke pouring out of them. The officer quickly stopped, called for help, and fire trucks rushed to the scene. When the firefighters arrived, they worked fast. They sprayed water, broke down doors, and tried to put out the flames. The smell of smoke and burning plastic filled the air. Neighbors watched, worried, not yet knowing the dark truth hidden inside.
At first, it seemed like just a fire. Fires can happen anywhere, maybe an accident, maybe something small that spread too fast. But as the firefighters battled the flames and the smoke cleared, they saw something that made their hearts drop. Inside the yogurt shop, they discovered the bodies of 4 girls. They were so young, just teenagers. The girls who had been working and laughing only hours earlier were now gone. The shop, once a happy place filled with frozen yogurt and giggles, had turned into a place of sadness. The scene shocked everyone. These were not just victims of a fire. It was clear that something much more terrible had happened. The police quickly realized this was not an accident. The girls had been hurt before the fire. Someone had done something cruel to them. The fire wasn't just a fire. It was set on purpose to try to cover up what happened. The police officers who walked through the shop that morning could not believe what they saw. It was one of the worst crime scenes Austin had ever known. The news spread quickly, and soon the whole city was talking about it. Parents hugged their children tighter, neighbors whispered in fear, and the community wondered, who could have done such a thing? The yogurt shop, once a bright spot in the neighborhood, was now a place people looked at with heavy hearts. Flowers and notes started to appear outside. People cried and left teddy bears, praying for the girls and their families. Detectives began their work immediately. They searched every inch of the shop, looking for clues. They collected ashes, fingerprints, and anything that might help them find the truth. But the fire had destroyed so much, making their job very hard. Still, they promised the families in the city that they would not give up. They would find out who was responsible. But for that moment, all anyone could feel was grief. The discovery inside the yogurt shop was too painful to believe. The city of Austin would never forget that day, the day the fire revealed not just smoke and ash, but the silence of 4 young voices that had been taken far too soon.
Behind every headline and every police report were 4 young girls, each with her own life, her own dreams, and a family who loved her deeply. The tragedy was not just about a crime scene. It was about 4 bright souls who were taken too soon. Jennifer Harbison. Jennifer was 17 years old. She was responsible, hardworking, and had a big heart. That night, she was closing the yogurt shop with her best friend, Eliza. Jennifer was a cheerleader and also loved animals. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. Her friends remembered her smile, how it could light up a room. To her family, she was not only a daughter, but also a role model for her younger sister, Sarah, who looked up to her in every way. Sarah Harbison. Sarah was just 15 years old, the youngest among the 4. She adored her sister Jennifer and wanted to be like her. Sarah was full of life, playful, and loved spending time with friends. She had a natural kindness that drew people to her. On the night of the tragedy, she was simply hanging out with Jennifer, looking forward to the weekend. She had so much life ahead of her, but it was stolen in one night. Eliza Thomas. Eliza, 17, was Jennifer's best friend. They worked at the yogurt shop together,
often sharing secrets and laughter during slow hours. Eliza was smart and caring. She was also deeply loved by her family. She dreamed about going to college, exploring the world, and building a future full of possibilities. Her parents described her as the type of girl who always wanted to help others, whether it was at school, at home, or with her friends. Amy Ayers. Amy was just 13 years old, the youngest victim. She was sweet, gentle, and loved animals, just like Jennifer. Amy had tagged along with her friends that night, excited to spend time with the older girls. She loved horseback riding and hoped to become a veterinarian too. Her youth made the loss even more painful. She had barely started her journey in life. For their families, the loss was crushing. Jennifer and Sarah's parents lost both of their daughters on the same night. Eliza's family lost a daughter who was their pride and joy. Amy's parents lost their little girl, the baby of the family. The pain was unbearable. Bedrooms were left untouched for years as parents couldn't bring themselves to move their daughters' belongings. School friends left flowers, cried in classrooms, and struggled to understand how such evil could happen. The community gathered for vigils. Candles flickered in the night as people prayed for the girls. Their faces were printed on posters, shared in newspapers, and remembered in yearbooks. Austin had never felt so broken. The girls' dreams, to go to college, to work with animals, to live full and happy lives, were gone in an instant. But their memories lived on through their families and friends, who promised never to forget them. This was not just a crime. It was the end of 4 precious lives, each carrying a story worth telling. And for the families, the pain never fully healed. Every birthday, every holiday, every school graduation they missed became another reminder of what was stolen that December night. The victims were not just names in a file. They were daughters, sisters, and friends. And their absence left a hole in the heart of Austin that would never close.
After the terrible fire at the yogurt shop, Austin police knew they had a very serious mystery to solve. This was not just any fire. It was a crime, and 4 young girls had lost their lives. The whole city was heartbroken, and everyone wanted answers. When investigators walked through the burned-out shop, they found clues that told them this was no accident. The fire had been started on purpose. Someone had poured flammable liquid around the store and lit it. That meant whoever set the fire also tried to destroy evidence of what happened. The police began by carefully collecting every piece of evidence they could find in the ashes. They looked at the cash register, the burned shelves, and even tiny bits of cloth or hair that might have survived the flames. They took photographs of the scene and made notes about where each girl had been found. To the officers, this was like a giant, heartbreaking puzzle, and every small detail could matter. At first, investigators thought maybe it was a robbery. The cash register drawer was open and some money was missing, but something didn't add up. Robbers usually want to get in and out quickly. Why would they stay so long? Why would they set a fire? Why would they harm 4 innocent girls? Police also thought about the possibility that someone targeted the yogurt shop itself. Was there someone angry with the owners? Maybe a customer who had been upset? Detectives asked neighbors and shop owners nearby if they saw anything strange that night. Some people said they saw suspicious men hanging around the strip mall earlier in the evening. Others mentioned hearing noises around closing time, but no one saw exactly what happened inside. The investigators then turned to the families of the victims. They asked if the girls had any enemies, anyone who might have wanted to hurt them. But everyone said the same thing. These were good, kind girls who just wanted to work and be together. There was no reason for anyone to wish them harm. That made the case even more confusing. The police began building a list of possible suspects. They thought about strangers who had been seen near the store, people with a history of robbery, or even men known to cause trouble in Austin. They also wondered if more than one person was involved. The crime seemed too big for just one person. 4 girls, a fire, and a robbery. It all suggested that more than one person might have been there that night. Detectives also looked at the way the fire had spread. Experts were brought in to study the burn marks on the walls and floor. These experts explained that the fire had been set in more than one place. That meant someone had walked around with fuel, pouring it in different areas. It was not quick or careless. It was planned. Whoever did this wanted the yogurt shop to be destroyed completely.
As the investigation moved forward, theories began to form. Some officers thought it was a group of young men who wanted money and panicked when the girls saw their faces. Others thought it could have been a cruel act done by people who enjoyed causing pain. Still, no clear answers were found. One of the hardest parts for the police was the lack of physical evidence. The fire had burned so hot and so fast that it destroyed much of what they could have used to find the killers. Fingerprints, footprints, even the smallest clues. Many had turned to ash. This made the investigation one of the toughest cases Austin had ever faced. Despite the challenges, the police did not give up. They interviewed dozens of people, from friends of the victims to strangers who lived nearby. They checked records of people recently released from jail. They looked into anyone with a history of arson or violence. Day after day, they worked, hoping for a breakthrough. But as weeks turned into months, and months into years, the case became colder. Theories came and went, but no solid suspect was named. The families of the 4 girls kept waiting for justice, but answers were still out of reach. The investigation into the yogurt shop murders had only just begun, but already it was proving to be one of the most difficult mysteries in Texas history. The investigation into the yogurt shop murders was already complicated, but what came next made things even harder. As detectives searched for answers, they became desperate. They wanted to solve the crime quickly, not only to bring justice to the 4 girls, but also to calm the community of Austin, which was terrified. But in that rush, some very serious mistakes were made. The crime had shaken Austin like nothing before. Parents were afraid to let their children go out. Business owners were on edge, and people kept looking over their shoulders at night. The police felt this fear too. Every day they faced questions from reporters and angry calls from citizens demanding, "Who did this? Why haven't you caught them yet?" Detectives felt cornered. They needed answers, and sometimes when pressure is too strong, it leads to wrong choices. By the early 1990s, a few teenagers became the focus of suspicion. Their names were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. They were young, not much older than the victims themselves, and had gotten into small troubles before. Police believed they might be capable of something terrible. One of them, Maurice Pierce, was first noticed because he was caught with a gun at a shopping mall not long after the murders. It wasn't the same gun used in the yogurt shop crime, but it was enough for detectives to pay attention. Soon, all 4 boys were on the radar. The police brought the boys in, one by one, for questioning. At first, they denied everything, but the interviews went on and on for hours. Detectives pushed them hard, suggesting stories, asking them to imagine how the crime might have happened.
Finally, 2 of the young men, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, gave confessions. They described the crime in detail, but the words didn't always match the facts. Still, for the police, it seemed like a huge breakthrough. After years of searching, they finally had suspects who admitted guilt. At first glance, a confession feels like the strongest evidence possible. If someone says, "Yes, I did it," then the case should be over. But in reality, things aren't always that simple. In the yogurt shop case, the confessions were not clear. Sometimes the details the boys gave were wrong, like how the fire was started, where the girls were in the shop, or which weapons were used. These mistakes raised big questions. Were the boys making things up? Were they pressured into saying what the police wanted to hear? Psychologists have since explained that false confessions can happen when people are scared, tired, or pushed too hard. A teenager, especially, might confess just to make the pressure stop, even if he is innocent. Despite the problems, the police moved forward. All 4 boys were arrested and charged. The community breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, it seemed the nightmare was ending. Families of the victims believed justice might soon come. But cracks appeared quickly. One of the 4, Forrest Wellborn, was let go when evidence against him fell apart. Still, the other 3 faced trial. Robert Sprimstein and Michael Scott were both convicted. They were sentenced to life in prison. For a while, it looked like the case was closed. The city tried to heal, but deep down, doubts never really went away. Years later, new science began to change everything. DNA testing had improved since the early 1990s. When investigators rechecked evidence from the crime scene, the DNA did not match Springsteen, Scott, Pierce, or Wellborn.
This was a bombshell. The very evidence that could have confirmed the confessions now showed something else, that someone else, still unknown, was there that night. Suddenly, the convictions looked very shaky. Defense lawyers argued that their clients had been trapped by false confessions and poor police work. Judges agreed, and eventually, the convictions were overturned. By the mid-2000s, all 4 young men were free again. For the families of the victims, it was another heartbreak. They had believed justice was served, only to be told it wasn't. The community, too, was left confused. If these boys didn't do it, then who did? Instead of solving the case, the arrests and trials had only made things more complicated. 4 lives had been ruined by wrongful accusations, and the real killer, or killers, were still out there, unknown. For the parents of Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza, this was unbearable. First, they lost their daughters. Then, they went through the long trials, believing answers had come. And now, they had to face the truth that nothing was settled. Austin, too, was left with scars. People no longer felt they could fully trust the justice system. The case had turned from a crime into a deep wound for the entire city. The wrong turns of the investigation remain one of the most painful parts of the yogurt shop murders. Instead of bringing peace, they brought even more mystery. And the real question, who truly committed the crime, remained unanswered. Time has a way of moving forward, even when hearts are stuck in the past. After the yogurt shop tragedy, Austin changed forever. For weeks, people were too afraid to go out at night. Families held their children a little closer, and the city's once easygoing spirit felt heavier. But as weeks turned into months and months into years, something even harder set in. Silence. The answers never came. The parents of the 4 girls lived through something no family should ever face. Each birthday, each holiday, each empty chair at the dinner table was a reminder of what was stolen. Eliza's parents, for example, kept her room the same for years. The posters on her wall, her favorite stuffed animal on the bed. It was as if she were waiting for her to walk back in.
Amy's family would leave her favorite dessert, chocolate cake, at the table on her birthday, whispering that maybe she could still feel their love from wherever she was. Every time the families walked past a yogurt shop or even saw the glow of neon lights at night, it felt like reopening a wound. The pain never really healed. Some families spoke publicly, hoping their voices would push the police to keep trying. Others stayed quiet, carrying their sorrow inside. But none of them ever stopped hoping for justice.
The city of Austin also carried the weight. People remembered where they were the night it happened. Teachers, neighbors, police officers, everyone in town had a story about how they first heard the news. For many, it was the first time they realized how fragile life could be. Parents who once let their kids walk freely to the store or spend time at the mall now thought twice. The crime had stolen not only the girls, but also the city's sense of safety. The investigation stretched on, but years passed with no real answers. Every time there was a new tip or a new suspect, hope would flare like a match. Families would think, maybe this is it. Maybe we'll finally know. But time after time, that match blew out, leaving only darkness. Wrongful arrests, false confessions, dead-end leads. It all made the truth seem even farther away. As the 1990s faded into the 2000s, frustration grew. Why couldn't the police solve this? Why did justice seem so far out of reach? Some wondered if the case had been mishandled from the start. Others worried that whoever was truly responsible might never be caught. For the families, every year that passed felt like another layer of pain. They would gather together on anniversaries of the crime, lighting candles and saying prayers. Some community members joined too, refusing to let the memory of the girls fade away. At those vigils, names were spoken with love. Eliza, Amy, Sarah, Jennifer. No one wanted them to be remembered only as victims. They wanted them remembered as daughters, sisters, and friends. But still, there was no justice, no clear answers. The case sat cold, like a door locked tight with no key. And as decades passed, the fear grew stronger. What if the truth never came out? What if the city of Austin had to live forever with a mystery that cut so deep? Even so, the families never gave up. They couldn't. Love kept them going. They believed, deep in their hearts, that one day, somehow, the truth would finally be uncovered. Until then, they carried both grief and hope, walking through each day with the memory of 4 girls who should have had so many more tomorrows. For many years after the yogurt shop tragedy, the case felt stuck in the shadows. Families were grieving, police were searching, and the city of Austin carried a scar that just wouldn't heal. People moved on with their lives, but whenever December came, the memory of the 4 girls came back like a heavy cloud. It felt like time had frozen on that night. But the world was changing. New technology, especially DNA testing, was becoming stronger and more reliable. In the 1990s, DNA science was still young. By the 2000s, it had grown into one of the most powerful tools in solving crimes. Suddenly, detectives in Austin had something new to hope for. When investigators looked back at the yogurt shop case, they realized they still had pieces of evidence from that night. Burned clothes, small fragments, and other samples had been carefully saved. For years, those items seemed silent, unable to tell their secrets. But now, DNA testing offered the chance to make them speak. It was not easy. The fire had destroyed and damaged much of the evidence. The samples were tiny, fragile, and mixed up. Still, the hope was that one clear DNA match could point to the people who were really inside that shop that night. Families were told about the new testing. For them, it was both exciting and painful. Could this finally bring justice, or would it be another disappointment?
Every time the phone rang, every time a news report mentioned DNA, hearts would race. The first results were frustrating. Some DNA didn't match anyone in the system. Others were too weak to be useful. For years, it felt like the evidence was teasing the families, close to giving answers, but never quite enough. Even so, the yogurt shop case never disappeared. Detectives came and went, but someone was always working on it. Journalists kept telling the story, reminding the city that justice had not been done. Community members gathered on anniversaries, lighting candles, sharing memories, and asking out loud, "When will we know the truth?" Sometimes new suspects were whispered about. Sometimes rumors spread that an arrest was coming. But then, silence. The families had to keep waiting.
By the 2010s, DNA science had become even more advanced. It could read smaller samples and separate mixed DNA from multiple people. Suddenly, the little bits of evidence from 1991 looked important again. Detectives sent the samples for new testing. This time, the results brought both hope and more mystery. Some of the DNA belonged to men who were never part of the old suspects. They weren't the ones who had confessed years earlier. They were unknown. This discovery shook the case. It meant that the real killers might never have been caught or even suspected. It also meant the wrongful arrests years earlier were even more tragic, since innocent people had lost years of their lives while the true killers walked free. For the families, the new DNA was like a flicker of light in the darkness. It proved that the case wasn't hopeless, but it also brought fresh pain. Because if there was new DNA, why were there still no arrests? Why, after all these years, did justice still feel so far away? Some parents grew older without answers. Some siblings grew up, always carrying the hole left behind by their sisters. Every holiday season, the yogurt shop tragedy returned to the news, and every time the families repeated the same plea. Please, don't forget. Please, help us find the truth. Today, more than 30 years later, the yogurt shop murders are still one of Austin's deepest mysteries. The city has changed, the shop itself is long gone, but the memory of the four girls, Amy, Sarah, Eliza, and Jennifer, remains powerful. Their faces are still on posters. Their names are still spoken with love. Detectives say the case is still open. They believe that one day, DNA, combined with new technology and fresh tips, might solve it. People hope that somewhere out there, someone will finally be brave enough to talk. Maybe a guilty conscience will give way. Maybe science will finally catch up. For now, the yogurt shop case is a wound that hasn't healed, but it's also a flame that hasn't gone out. The families still believe in answers, the city still remembers, and the world still waits for the day when justice finally comes. Because even though the years have passed, the promise remains. These girls will not be forgotten. Their story will not end in silence.
More than 30 years have passed since that terrible night in Austin. Yet the story of the yogurt shop murders still lingers in the hearts of many. For the families, it is not just history, it is their lives, forever changed. For the city, it is a wound that has never fully healed. And for those who study crime and justice, it is a lesson about mistakes, hope, and the deep need for truth. The reason this case matters so much is simple. 4 young girls were robbed of their futures. They were daughters, sisters, and friends. They should have grown up, chased their dreams, and lived full lives. Instead, they became victims of one of the cruelest crimes in Austin's history. To forget them would feel like letting their voices fade away. It also matters because of the mistakes that happened during the investigation.
Innocent young men were put in jail, accused of something they did not do. Families of both the victims and the wrongly accused suffered for years. It showed everyone how fragile the justice system can be when it relies on pressure, fear, or bad evidence. People learned that rushing to solve a case can sometimes bring more harm than good. Another reason it matters is because the case still has no clear ending. Yes, DNA gave new hope. Yes, there are suspects. But no one has ever been fully held responsible in a way that feels final. That means there are still questions. Who did this? Why? How could they walk free all these years? These unanswered questions are heavy for the families, for the city, and even for strangers who only hear the story today. For Austin, the yogurt shop murders became a symbol of lost innocence. The city was once thought of as a safe and quiet place, but that night showed that darkness can appear anywhere. It forced people to look at how they protect their children, how they trust their justice system, and how they come together after tragedy. For the families, every anniversary is a reminder of their loss. They keep photos of their daughters. They tell stories about their laughter, their kindness, their dreams. They attend court hearings, hoping that maybe one day they will hear the truth. Their strength and love keep the memory of the girls alive. And for the rest of us, this story is a call to never give up on justice. It teaches us that every victim deserves their story told, every family deserves answers, and every mistake in the system must be learned from. It reminds us to be cautious about false confessions, to value real science like DNA, and to never forget the human cost behind the headlines. Even today, young people in Austin learn about the case. They visit the spot where the yogurt shop once stood. They leave flowers and messages. They keep the memory alive, not because they knew the girls personally, but because they understand that such pain should never be ignored. Why does it still matter? Because justice matters, because truth matters, because the lives of 4 innocent girls matter. Until the day the full truth comes out, this case will continue to haunt Austin, and it will continue to remind the world of the importance of never giving up, no matter how much time has passed. The yogurt shop murders are not just a story of loss. They are a story of memory, hope, and the never-ending fight for answers.